Bible dit que Dieu et le ciel sont saints. Et saint veut tout simplement dire parfait. Il est capital de comprendre que Dieu ne peut rien laisser d'imparfait entrer au ciel. Sinon, ce ne serait plus le ciel. La Bible dit aussi que nous avons tous un corps et une âme. À notre mort, notre corps est enterré ou incinéré. Mais notre âme, le vrai nous, vit pour toujours, soit au ciel, soit en enfer. Malheureusement, nous avons un problème, car la Bible dit que si nous avons enfreint une seule des lois de Dieu, par exemple, si nous avons menti une fois, triché une fois, détesté une fois, juste une fois, comme nous l'avons tous fait, soyons honnêtes, alors notre âme devient imparfaite et nous ne pouvons pas entrer au ciel. Connais-tu quelqu'un qui n'a jamais enfreint une seule des lois de Dieu? La réponse est évidemment non. Alors, voilà notre problème. Nous avons tous enfreint les lois de Dieu, c'est pourquoi nous avons tous une âme imparfaite. Ainsi, si à notre mort, notre âme peut aller soit au ciel, soit en enfer, mais que pour aller au ciel, nous devons avoir un casier judiciaire vierge, et aucun d'entre nous n'en avons un, alors cela signifie que nous allons tout droit en enfer. Cela peut sembler dur, et tu te demandes peut-être comment un Dieu plein d'amour a pu créer un lieu tel que l'enfer, et comment peut-il en plus y envoyer des gens? Alors pensons-y dans ce sens. Pense à quelqu'un que tu aimes vraiment. Maintenant, imagine que cette personne ait été assassinée. L'assassin est arrêté et plaide coupable. Mais tu es horrifié lorsque le juge dit « C'est très mal ce que vous avez fait. Mais parce que je suis un juge plein d'amour, je vais vous faire relâcher. » Tu serais très fâché, n'est-ce pas? Pourquoi? Parce que tu sais que lorsque quelqu'un enfreint la loi, il doit être puni. Sinon, il n'y a pas de justice. Donc l'enfer n'est pas une question d'amour, mais de justice. Examinons 3 questions pour comprendre pourquoi il y a ce lieu qui s'appelle l'enfer. As-tu déjà menti une fois dans ta vie? La réponse est sûrement oui, même si ce n'est qu'un petit mensonge. Si tu as menti une seule fois, alors tu es coupable de mensonge. As-tu déjà pris quelque chose qui ne t'appartient pas? Par exemple, es-tu déjà arrivé en retard au travail ou es-tu déjà parti trop tôt en étant quand même payé? As-tu déjà utilisé le téléphone du patron ou la photocopieuse sans demander la permission ou ramené un stylo du bureau à la maison? Tout ceci, bien sûr, est du vol. La plupart des gens ont pris quelque chose qui ne leur appartient pas, ce qui les rend coupables de vol. Penses-tu que Dieu va laisser un groupe de voleurs menteurs comme nous aller au ciel? C'est peu probable, car s'il le faisait, il serait comme le juge injuste qui n'a pas condamné l'assassin de la personne que tu aimais. Il n'y a pas 36 solutions. Mais beaucoup diront, attends un peu, je suis quelqu'un de bien. Et il y a une grande différence entre le mensonge, le vol et le meurtre. Or, je n'ai jamais tué personne. Mais ce qui est intéressant, c'est la façon dont Jésus a redéfini le mot meurtre. Il a dit, si vous avez détesté quelqu'un dans votre cœur, vous l'avez tué dans votre cœur. Alors, voici la dernière question. As-tu déjà détesté quelqu'un? La vérité, c'est que la plupart des gens ont déjà ressenti de la colère ou de la haine vis-à-vis des autres. Ce qui, selon Dieu, nous rend coupables de meurtre. Voilà la mauvaise nouvelle. Afin qu'il y ait une justice, il faut qu'il y ait un endroit comme l'enfer. Mais voici la bonne nouvelle. Et c'est là que Jésus entre en jeu. Ce qui distingue Jésus du reste du monde, c'est qu'il est parfait. Contrairement à nous, il n'a enfreint aucune des lois de Dieu. C'est pourquoi il a un casier judiciaire vierge, une âme parfaite. Imagine la scène avant que Jésus ne vienne sur terre, il y a 2000 ans. Jésus a regardé dans l'avenir et t'a vu ici aujourd'hui. Il s'est tourné vers Dieu, son Père, et lui a demandé « Père, j'aime les gens de ce monde et je ne veux pas qu'ils aillent en enfer pour avoir enfreint tes lois. Existe-t-il un moyen pour qu'ils soient pardonnés ?» Dieu le Père a regardé son Fils et a dit « Jésus, il n'y a qu'un moyen. Tu devras aller sur terre, devenir un être humain et vivre une vie parfaite. Puis tu mourras d'une mort cruelle sur une croix pour prendre la punition que les gens du monde méritent pour avoir enfreint mes lois. Quand tu auras fait ceci, le jour où ils te demanderont d'échanger leur casier judiciaire avec ton casier judiciaire parfait, alors il leur sera possible d'être pardonnés. » Jésus a accepté volontairement, et il y a 2000 ans, il est venu pour donner sa vie pour nous, pour payer le prix de toutes les lois de Dieu que nous avons enfreintes. Or, il n'y a pas de plus grand amour que lorsque quelqu'un donne sa vie pour nous. Mais il y a encore autre chose que nous devons faire pour être pardonnés. Il y a 3 événements principaux dans la vie de chacun. La naissance et la mort, mais nous n'avons aucun contrôle là-dessus. Mais il y a aussi le 3e, le jour où nous demandons à Jésus de nous pardonner, quand nous lui demandons de nous donner son casier judiciaire vierge. Il y a certaines idées reçues à ce sujet, mais dans la Bible, le principe du pardon de Dieu est clair. Nous ne sommes pas pardonnés en étant baptisés ou confirmés, ni même en priant occasionnellement, ou en allant à l'église, ou en croyant en Dieu, ou en essayant d'être bon. Ce sont toutes de bonnes choses, mais aucune ne nous accorde le pardon. Jésus a dit qu'il y a 2 choses que nous devons faire pour être pardonnés. La première est que nous devons avoir la volonté de nous détourner de tout ce que nous savons être mal et demander pardon à Dieu. Remarquez le mot « volonté ». Il y a peut-être certaines choses que nous nous sentons incapables de renoncer par nos propres forces, telles que dépendance, mauvaises habitudes ou des obsessions. Mais là n'est pas le problème. Dieu nous aidera du moment que nous en avons la volonté et que nous voulons nous détourner de ces choses-là et demander pardon à Dieu. La deuxième chose que nous devons faire, c'est faire totalement confiance à Jésus. Si Dieu t'a créé, ainsi que l'univers tout entier, ne penses-tu pas qu'il mérite d'être la personne au centre de ta vie? Faire totalement confiance, c'est reconnaître que Jésus est ton sauveur et accepter de le suivre. Quand tu es né, c'est comme si Dieu avait ouvert un livre sur ta vie. Maintenant, garde en tête que Dieu voit tout ce que tu fais. Il connaît chaque attitude, chaque pensée, chaque motif et chaque action. À chaque fois que nous brisons juste une des lois de Dieu, c'est écrit dans ce livre. Tu imagines bien qu'à la fin de nos vies, il y a toute une bibliothèque de livres contre nous. Mais quand tu te tournes vers Jésus et que tu lui fais confiance, il se passe quelque chose d'incroyable. C'est comme si Jésus prenait ton livre et se tenait en haut d'une falaise et déchirait toutes les pages. Le casier judiciaire entier de tout ce que tu as fait de mal et les jeter dans la mer la plus profonde. Il promet de ne plus jamais se rappeler de toutes ces choses. Jésus prend ensuite une copie de son casier judiciaire vierge que tu lui as demandé de te donner et il la glisse entre les 2 couvertures du livre où ton nom est inscrit. Ce nouveau livre est gardé précieusement au ciel. Le miracle est que l'on ne touche plus à ton livre à partir du moment où tu demandes à Jésus de te pardonner et jusqu'à ta mort. Même si tu fais des erreurs et brises encore les lois de Dieu. Devenir un chrétien ne te rend pas parfait sur le coup, et tu ne peux pas non plus dire une prière rapide et ensuite retourner à ton ancienne manière de vivre. Rappelle-toi, Dieu t'a pardonné pour toujours quand tu lui as demandé le casier judiciaire vierge de Jésus. Tout ce qu'il demande, c'est que tu lui soumettes tout et le laisses te purifier jour après jour. Quand tu mourras, tu passeras en jugement devant Dieu. Il ordonnera à ses anges d'aller chercher ton livre. Il l'ouvrira et dira « Cette personne était parfaite ». Et tu répondras « Non, je ne l'étais pas. J'ai enfreint tes lois. Est-ce que je ne mérite pas d'aller en enfer ?» Et Jésus te dira « Selon la justice, tu mérites d'aller en enfer. Tu as enfreint mes lois, et certaines, de nombreuses fois. Mais, mon enfant, tu as mon casier judiciaire vierge. Celui que je t'ai donné quand tu t'es tourné vers moi et que tu m'as fait confiance, et je t'ai pardonné. Bienvenue au ciel. » C'est pourquoi Jésus est si merveilleux. Grâce à lui, il est possible que chacun, peu importe les erreurs commises, soit pardonné et entre un jour au ciel. Imagine que tu ne te sois jamais tourné vers Jésus. Pense à ce qui pourrait arriver. Quand tu mourras, tu iras devant Dieu lors du jugement et Dieu te dira « Je suis désolé, je ne peux pas te laisser entrer au ciel, je dois t'envoyer en enfer. Tu ne m'as jamais demandé de te pardonner. Je t'aimais tellement que j'ai tenté par 6 façons différentes d'attirer ton attention. Premièrement, je suis mort sur la croix pour prendre sur moi ta punition. Deuxièmement, quelqu'un t'a expliqué d'une manière simple que tu pouvais être pardonné. Troisièmement, il y avait des églises à travers le monde. Certaines étaient bonnes, d'autres moins bonnes. Tu aurais pu trouver les bonnes. Quatrièmement, je t'ai donné une conscience pour que tu distingues le bien du mal. Cinquièmement, j'ai créé un monde si beau. Comment as-tu pu ignorer ma présence? Et sixièmement, je suis ressuscité des morts, afin de prouver que je suis Dieu, et que tout ce que j'ai dit était vrai. Mais tu n'as encore rien fait. Je suis désolé, je ne peux pas te laisser entrer au ciel. Je dois t'envoyer en enfer. Et toi, si tu meurs ce soir, où iras-tu? Rappelle-toi, pour entrer au ciel, il faut un casier judiciaire vierge, que tu ne peux avoir sans avoir demandé à Jésus de te donner le sien. Afin de recevoir ce don gratuit, tu dois faire seulement 2 choses. Tout d'abord, tu dois vouloir te détourner de tout ce qui est mauvais dans ta vie et demander pardon à Jésus. Et deuxièmement, tu dois faire totalement confiance à Jésus. À moins de faire ces 2 choses, il t'est impossible d'être pardonné et à ta mort, il te sera impossible d'entrer au ciel. Ce qui est affreusement triste, parce que c'est la raison pour laquelle Jésus est mort pour toi.
Qual é o teu nome? Príncipe das Trevas! Você matou quem que você falou, cara?
O tio dele.
Matou como?
6 tiros. Eu tava planejando a morte do tio dele faz tempo. Ele tava num carro e foi 2 bandidos e atiraram nele. 6 tiros no peito! É o que eu faço, quem se afasta.
Ele se afastou?
Se afastou.
Ele era obreiro?
Não.
Era membro?
Era membro firme.
Se afastou?
Sim.
O que levou ele a se afastar?
Mágoa.
De quem?
De um pastor. Eu ajo sem vocês perceberem e eu derrubo vocês. Lá no meu caldeirão tem vários com nomes de pastores, membros, obreiros, ovelhinhas. Vocês não têm noção quantos de vocês eu vou levar esse ano. Aquele vídeo que ele te mostrou fui eu. Na verdade, ninguém sabe como o caminhão tombou de verdade. Ele tava drogado, louco, de tanto ter cheirado. Porque ele não podia pegar no sono. Mas eu entrei no sistema nervoso dele e acabei com ele.
E quando ele morreu?
O corpo dele ficou tão feio. Essa hora ele tá lá. Meu Deus, tenha misericórdia de mim. Igual o tio dele também tá. Mas é tarde, é meu. Não deu bola mesmo pra que esse desgraçado prega. Eu pego. Vocês, muito de vocês, se preocupam com gravata, com roupa. Ai, como eu queria fazer o que eu quero. Me dá uma brecha. Me dá uma brecha. Tem muito lá naquela igreja, lá onde esse desgraçado tá, bispo. Muitos estão desistindo da alma dele. Porque é assim que eu trabalho. Primeiro, eu deixo os obreiros louco, a ponto de desistir. Ali eu já entrei no obreiro sem ele perceber. É questão de 5 meses eu derrubo ele. Esse moleque, eu vejo ele no altar. E eu tenho ordem do meu senhor Satanás pra vir buscar ele pessoalmente. Eu não mandei nenhum empregado.
Buscar quem?
Minha alma desse moleque. Ele era... ele fez tanta coisa. Quando ele fez pacto comigo, eu apareço pra ele dia e noite. Se vocês soubessem como eu sou feio, a minha cara de bode, o meu 7 chifres, a minha asa. Eu assusto ele todo dia. que lá na igreja dele tem muitos obreiros que acham que é mentira. É isso que eu faço, seus otários! Vocês tudo que acham que é mentira já estão aqui, ó. Agora vocês falam tão amarrado, né, bispo? Vai lá conhecer, pra você ver. Eu faço a festa lá. Agora é tarde demais.
O tio dele pede o que nesse momento lá?
Água. O calor lá é insuportável. Se vocês soubessem como é o inferno, vocês não dariam tão mole pra mim entrar em vocês. Essas horas, o tio dele fica lá no meu caldeirão, pulando lá, de tanto que eu espeto ele com meu garfo. Eu quero água, Senhor, eu quero água. Mas é tarde demais. A alma dele é minha.
E quando a pessoa se rende a Jesus, quando ela se entrega sinceramente, e aí?
Aí eu não posso tocar.
Quando ela está no braseiro, quando ela está com uma brasa viva.
Muitos aqui estavam assim, eu não podia tocar.
Você já levou alguém da família dele que você não pôde levar para o inferno? Já matou alguém que não pôde? Já?
Já?
Quem?
A avó dele, a mãe da mãe dele. Só que o pai dela tá no inferno.
Como é que foi com a mãe dele e a avó dele? Você não pôde tocar nela, não?
Ela ia na igreja e ela morreu desse jeito. Você quer que eu fale, seu desgraçado?
Diga. Ela tá com quem?
Com...
Como é que ela morreu?
Ela olhou pra neta dela, na casa dela, e virou assim e falou isso. Obrigado por tudo que vocês fizeram por mim. E deitou o pescoço de lado. Morreu sem dor. Morreu com Jesus.
Você viu?
Eu vi.
Você viu eles vindo buscar ela?
Eu vi, eu tava do lado. Eu tentei, mas Miguel não deixou eu levar.
E quando a alma dela descolou do corpo, qual foi a reação dela quando viu os anjos?
Ela ficou feliz, ela disse assim: glória a Deus por tudo que eu fiz pelo Senhor. A minha alma está salva. E os anjos balançaram a cabeça, dizendo que ela ia morar eternamente com ele.
E o Amagedon?
Começou.
Já começou?
Já. São separados agora os que são dele, os que são meu. No mundo inteiro está sendo separado. Milhões para mim. E por teu Deus, os anjos já separou. A marca da besta tá perto. Já. Tem uns que não tem mais salvação.
Quais são esses que não têm salvação?
Aqueles que estão brincando de ser de Deus. Principalmente aqueles que são obreiros no mundo inteiro. Membros evangelistas que estão brincando. Ele não desceu ainda por causa dos eleitos.
Quem são os eleitos?
Aqueles que têm um coração puro e que ainda resiste milhões de demônios. Aqueles que querem ter um Deus de verdade.
Por causa deles ele ainda não desceu? Quer dizer que ele já está às portas?
Já. Mas as portas não, desgraçado.
Tá não?
Ele já saiu da porta. Ele tá pertinho da terra. Por que você acha que o mundo inteiro tá esse inferno? E já matando milhões rápido. A nossa chance tá acabando. Não vai ter mais chance. Ele tá perto. E a gente já sente o fogo dele chegando na Terra.
Mais perto do que eu posso imaginar.
Muito mais. Ele tava milhões de anos-luz da Terra. Ele já tá perto. Não vai dar tempo de mais nada. Muitos aqui tentam pensando só em bens materiais e não sabem que a alma tá perto pra descer pro abismo mais profundo. E nunca mais de lá vai sair lago de fogo. Nem nós demônios quer entrar nesses bandos de otários. Não dá valor em nada. Só queria uma chance que esses desgraçados têm várias. E eu não posso mais.
Qual é o teu nome, demônio?
Lúcifer.
We're going to feature a testimony by a man of God named Mickey Robinson. You're going to be absolutely amazed when you hear this story because he was in a plane crash that literally destroyed him. In fact, it killed him. And yet he's alive to tell the tale. Hold on to your seats right now and listen to this amazing, outstanding testimony of the goodness of God.
I'd never met anybody who ever told me about anything personally knowing God or anything supernatural other than historically what I knew from stories from the Bible. Never met one person who told me they had a real relationship with Jesus. Never knew about the need to really come into a relationship with the Lord through Jesus. And I was busy getting it on. But, you know, there's not enough excitement in the world to ever satisfy. You always got to have more. And I like stuff that was edgy, you know, skiing, and I always liked aviation stuff. And so I started taking flying lessons. And I thought it'd be more fun jumping out of airplanes. So I became a sport parachutist, and that really got me. I mean, I became obsessed with skydiving. It really consumed my life. My existence revolved around that 30 to 60 seconds in free fall and that 5-minute parachute ride. Then I had to do it again. It's like a drug, you know.
It's
it's
almost
good.
Like an addiction.
Oh, totally. And then all of a sudden, one night, all that was going to change. Shortly after takeoff, I don't really recall much because I was kind of dozing off, sitting next to the pilot, or actually sitting on the floor next to the pilot. We removed the seats in this new aircraft, and I was awakened by a sound unfamiliar to me. It was the sound of the motor going completely silent.
Uh-oh.
And the pilot turned to me and he slapped me. He says, "That's it, we're going down." So we just pitched forward and we plummeted straight down at over 100 miles an hour. And what was seen out of the cockpit, and this was told to me, I don't recall this, but we were going straight to the ground and we're headed right towards a gigantic oak tree. We did hit that tree going, like I said, over 100 miles an hour, and my face stopped my body going 100 miles an hour. So then the airplane cartwheeled on its wings and slammed into the ground. If you see pictures of the aircraft, it doesn't look like anybody could survive this. So there was obviously injury and confusion, and the two students got pushed out the doorway and by one of my friends who was a very experienced jumper. And the fourth man out saw me moving, and the pilot assumed we were leaving too. And just as he was going out, the plane went up in flames. And as he was running away, he heard screaming and realized I was trapped inside along with the pilot. And this brave man who was my friend and went back in the plane and saw me trying to escape where the wing had been torn loose from the airplane. But I was stuck, and by something on my equipment or my clothing was caught, and I was soaked with fuel, and it was on fire from head to toe.
Wow.
And just like you see in movies, a person whose whole body was engulfed in flames. And this is where God did the first miracle. This man grabbed a hold of my parachute harness and with his bare hands tore that loose. It's 2,000 pounds tensile strength in each one of those straps.
Wow.
Pulled so hard he pulled his thumbs out of his sockets. Dragged me away from the plane and slapped the fire out. It kept reigniting, and then he tried to go back for the pilot, and he couldn't. He was burned alive. Well, they rushed me off to the hospital. Obviously, it was horrible, and they rushed me off to the hospital and saw that I had sustained very serious injuries. I had a brain injury. I had burns over a large portion of my body. I had to find out my eye was blind, my right eye was blind, and, you know, tremendous cuts and, you know, this shock of, you know, that crash. They told my family I was going to die. They told my sister to come that day because I was not going to be there in the afternoon. I had an experience I had never heard about. Never heard anything like this. As I was laying there in that condition, just racked with pain and discomfort in every way possible, suddenly my inner man, the real me, my spirit, sat up out of my body, and I could feel my legs go through the springs of the bed.
Wow.
And my spirit came out of my body as if you would take a glove off your hand. And instantly, I was in the spiritual world. Instantaneously, I knew this was the real world. And this man that I was seeing was the real me.
Now, when that happened, were you aware of any pain still? Or
No,
were
I was
you
totally
completely separated from the pain and the carcass?
Completely, no. And I didn't even remember turning around and looking. I mean, I was transferred immediately into a spiritual dimension. And everything about the spirit world is more real than this world. The colors are brighter. The edges of everything are sharper. The emotions are just enhanced. They are clear. And instantaneously, the thing that really struck me the most was there was a complete absence of the awareness of time. Everything in this world is relative to time. You know, you got up this morning, you'll go to bed at night. Something is old, something is new, it will get old. Something is born, it will die. Everything in this plane, in the physical plane, in the natural plane, is relative to time. But everything in the spiritual plane is relative to eternity. So what had been natural to be aware of time was totally gone. And I was totally aware of eternity. It is shocking. It is stunning to be conscious and to know what eternity is. Also, logic and reasoning doesn't happen there. You know, based on the sum total of all my intelligent thoughts that I've learned, you know, I had a death and I'm in the spirit world. It's like you just know that you know that you know. It's like having a revelation constantly, and it was incredible. And I knew I was traveling. I could feel, you know, that I was traveling. And as I looked ahead, there was this pure white light. It was whiter than the whitest snow and brighter than 10,000 suns. And yet I could look right at it, and it was compelling. And it was like I was being towed. I was being towed like a tractor. And as I was looking, I could feel this anticipation. But then simultaneously to that, on my right side, I could feel something, and I looked, and there was this blackness sweeping. Now, this blackness, as I looked at it, instantly I was aware of its complete nature. It was eternal, like I was experiencing eternity. It was without any matter. It was without any life. It was void, and it was forever non-negotiable, cut off from the source of all life. And the more that I looked at it, the faster it would sweep. And the more that occurred, the more intense the feeling of the nature of being cut off and sealed forever and separated. It is horrific. You would not. I used to never be able to stand to be near anybody who could say go to hell after that. Because you wouldn't want the worst person. You wouldn't want Adolf Hitler, Bin Laden, Saddam. You wouldn't want any human being to ever go in there. It was so horrible. And as that was sweeping, it got down to, it was eclipsing this light. So there was just it was like you're in a room and you close the door, a dark room, and there's a little space between the door and the door jamb. It wasn't a doorway. It was really, this was a real place that I was seeing and that I was feeling. And as it was closing, it was eclipsing. And now I'm standing on the very edge, the precipice of eternal separation. And I scream out of my spirit, I'm sorry, I want to live. Give me another chance. And just before that was to close, I was standing in the presence of Almighty God. Wow. And instantly I knew I would never die for eternity. And that's mercy. It's unbelievable. Wow. And instantly I knew that this being who was off on this side of me, who I didn't see, but I was standing in this river of golden radiation. It looked like a moving river of golden light. And this river went that way, it went that way, it was underneath me, it was going right through me. And this river was alive. I don't know how to describe it, except that this
called the River of Life.
This river was alive, and it's going right through me, and I'm more alive than anybody can imagine. I mean, this is the height of the experience of life. It filled up with life, and somehow I knew this being was going to take care of me for eternity. I didn't see the New Jerusalem. I didn't see any angels in heaven. I didn't see any people who had gone before me. This was the max. So I was so filled with just the love and all of God's majesty, all of His authority, all of His love, everything was just flowing through me. I was like vibrating like a tuning fork, the very essence of God's nature. But when God spoke to me, and not in a language like you and I are talking now, but the knowledge of His purpose, the word of His purpose, came in through that same light. And I was taken back to the same way I was like being reeled in like a kite, and I went down through space and time, this dimension. As my spirit settled into my body, and I could start to hear out of these ears and see out of this eye, I came to in the room materialized, kind of like they beam up on Star Trek, and I heard myself speaking in this beautiful language that I had never heard anybody talk about before.
The heavenly language.
You know, it was a beautiful language, and when my brain turned on, I thought, what in the heck is this other language? And I was no longer, the person who was dying and dead was no longer, and I was born again and filled with the Holy Ghost. I never heard about that. You know, for years I wondered, what was that blackness, and why did it sweep down to where it was just a sliver, like about a half inch of white light? And years later, God revealed it to me. It was really a historical record of my life. That for all the years that I had lived, I was in darkness. And God gave me a space to cry out to Him. And in that space, it changed my future, my destiny, my whole purpose. God loved me the whole time. God was with me. But, please, don't wait until you're that desperate. We're desperate right now, and He's with you, and you have a chance today to cry out to God. It's not complicated. It's not religious. I mean, certainly my prayer wasn't all that complicated, and it wasn't about religion. It was about I needed a life, and there is no one of us before God that doesn't need the whole life that He has to offer. It's usually fear that keeps us from doing that. Or like we're afraid, well, I'm not good enough. That's the whole deal. We need God.
Christ is my reward and all of my devotion. Now there's nothing in this world that could ever satisfy. Through every trial, my soul will sing, no turning back. I've been set free. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Everything I need. Christ, my all in all, the joy of my salvation. And this whole God be the glory. Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Everything I need. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. And Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Everything I need. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back. No turning back. No turning back. No turning back.
Well, late one night she started to cry and thought he ain't coming home. She was tired of the lies, tired of the fight, but she didn't want to see him go. She fell on her knees and said, I haven't prayed since I was young, but Lord above, I need a miracle. Well, no matter who you are, and no matter what you've done, there will come a time when you can't make it on your own. And in your hour of desperation, though you're not the only one, praying, Lord above, I need a miracle. Yeah. I need a miracle. He lost his job and all he had in the fall of '09. Now he feared the worst, that he would lose his children and his wife. So he drove down deep into the woods and thought it ended all, and prayed, Lord above, I need a miracle. Well, no matter who you are, turned on the radio to hear a song for the last time. He didn't know what he was looking for, or even what he'd find. And the song he heard, it gave him hope and strength to carry on. And on that night, they found a miracle.